Phones are turned on. I'll call this meeting to order at 4:30 p.m. Please ensure that your microphones are turned on. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? I see none. Business, Charlie Angus, Member of Parliament, Timmins James Bay. So the federal government, they're looking at realigning the federal election lines, so it'd make our jurisdiction bigger. So I'd like to get someone to move that we go, moved by Councilor Lefebvre, seconded by Councilor Sobalski.
Moved by Councillor Lefebvre, seconded by Councillor Sobalski. Whereas the Electoral Boundary Commission has proposed to remove one of the electoral ridings from Northern Ontario, and whereas the proposal to diminish Northern Ontario's voice in Parliament will have a detrimental effect on participatory democracy and regional development, as the issues in Northern Ontario are significantly different than the issues facing the urban South. And whereas the Federal Boundary Commission proposal to cut representation in the North is contrary to the 2017 electoral boundary changes for Ontario that recognize the need to add 2 seats to ensure fair participation for Northern residents. And whereas many of the existing ridings in Northern Ontario are already larger than many European countries, a situation that will only be worsened by the addition of massively new regions to service. And whereas the proposed new super ridings will force municipalities to compete for a limited amount of riding funding, which will further exacerbate iniquities in the North. And whereas Northern Ontario's population per riding is already much bigger, much higher than many other rural and isolated regions in Canada's North, and whereas the courts have ruled that representation in Canada's democracy is not based merely on population, but on regions of interest and the right of citizens to engage with their elected representatives. And whereas any changes to electoral boundaries should be based on the principles of maintaining communities of interest within boundaries that are equitable in terms of population and geography. Now therefore be it resolved that Council for the Corporation of the Town of Iroquois Falls calls on the Electoral Boundary Commission to maintain the electoral representation of Northern Ontario and ensure that any boundary changes are done in a manner that responds to regional and local needs.
Is there any comments or questions? Councilor Lefebvre.
One suggestion, if I could, the second last whereas, where it says not based merely on population, but on regions of interest, that word regions be changed to communities. So it read communities of interest. That's what it actually actually makes more sense.
Yeah, the rest of council okay with that change? Yeah, so we can make that change, Kim?
Yeah, I'll need a moment
Yeah,
to
take your
put
time.
together the resolution, to amend this resolution.
You won't have to reread the whole thing, would you?
You
No.
got it. I
No,
do.
just reread the whereas.
Okay, so you would like changed the last statement.
The second last whereas.
Okay,
You see where it says, but on regions of regions of interest
but on regions of interest, you would like the word communities there?
instead of regions.
Okay.
Otherwise, very well written.
So whereas the courts have ruled that representation in Canada's democracy is not based merely on population, but on communities of interest and the right of citizens to engage with their elected representatives.
Perfect.
Is there any other comments or questions?
I would think that regions is more broad than communities, but I mean, it's fine.
What does council want? Regions or community?
Okay.
I think communities is the norm.
Yeah,
Regions of interest, I've never heard that used before.
okay. Rest of council, which one do you want? Regions or community? We'll go down the
To
line.
me, that's just semantics, so I'm fine either way.
Okay, well, we have to make a decision. So community or region? Counselor Lefebvre, what do you want? Community?
Call the question, community, yeah,
Yeah.
that's. what I'm
Counselor,
suggesting.
Counselor Charlebois?
I'll go with communities.
Counselor Sabalski? Sabalski?
Communities in the region.
Depends on what the court ruling is too, right? Like, are you familiar with that, Councilor Lefebvre?
No.
Are they using the term regions in the court ruling?
Where did we get the regions from, Kim? Is that
This,
from Charlie?
this resolution was provided by Charlie Angus, the Member of Parliament for Timmins and James Bay.
So that's
If I
what he
may-
had, regions.
If I may make a suggestion, I
Yeah.
suggest that we stick with the original motion that was provided by Mr. Angus.
Okay, okay.
That would be
Okay,
my.
council's good.
recommendation.
I was leaning towards that.
Council will agree to keep the original.
Okay. So it will say, whereas the courts have ruled that representation in Canada's democracy is not based merely on population, but on regions of interest and the right of citizens to engage with their elected representatives.
Okay,
All in favor?
we need a recorded vote
Okay,
because Councilor Stephanie Jaguar-Bernier is on Zoom.
yes, sorry about that.
It's all good.
I'm a little not with it.
It's all good.
So I believe Councillor Boucher is not in attendance, is that correct?
No, no.
Okay, Councillor Charlebois,
Or,
Councillor Sabalski,
or,
Councillor Jaguar Bernier,
Or,
Councillor Lefebvre,
Or,
Councillor Tremblay,
Or
Mayor Delorier,
Or,
motion's carried.
so closed session is nil.
Mhm.
Business arising from the closed session is nil. Adjournment at 4:38. Can I get someone to move? Councilor Lefebvre? Councilor Tremblay will second.
Moved by Councillor Lefebvre, seconded by Councillor Tremblay, that this meeting adjourns at 4:38 PM. Recorded vote,
Yeah,
Councillor Charlebois,
or,
Councillor Sabalski,
or.
Councillor Jaguar Bernier,
for,
Councillor Lefebvre,
or.
Councillor Tremblay,
or
Mayor Delorier,
or,
motion's carried.
thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Have a good night.